dip into the mid-single figures in places. So certainly a fresher start on Wednesday compared with recent mild mornings. A bright start as well in central and eastern UK, but further west it's going to soon turn wet and windy. Spells of rain moving through Northern Ireland into Scotland, eventually reaching northern and western England as well as Wales, accompanied by a strong wind with the risk of gales around Irish Sea coasts. And then Thursday brings more wet and unsettled weather.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, well, the London-based media seem to want Suella Braverman out of her job as Home Secretary. We debate, should she stay or should she go? Vaccine mandates. Up to 40,000 people lost their jobs in the care sector. Why is it some universities are still insisting on vaccines for those doing medical degrees? And joining me for Talking Pints, a former deputy editor of The Spectator and commentator on all things in modern Britain today, Petronella Wyatt. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight, the Home Secretary has described illegal immigration in the UK as an invasion of the southern coast of England. Speaking in the House of Commons, Suella Braverman said the asylum system is also broken, but she denied blocking the use of hotels for refugees. She also confirmed she's still committed to making the government's Rwanda policy work. Ms Braverman has been under increasing pressure over the backlog of migrants arriving into the UK, along with her admitted breaches of the ministerial code.
Some 40,000 people have arrived on the south coast this year alone. Many of them facilitated by criminal gangs, some of them actual members of criminal gangs. So let's stop pretending that they are all refugees in distress. And I am determined to do whatever it takes to break the criminal gangs and fix our hopelessly lax asylum system. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why I am in government. And that is why there are some people who would prefer to be rid of me.
Meanwhile, police have confirmed the suspect in a firebomb attack at a migrant centre in Dover is a 66-year-old man from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. Kent police were called to the Border Force Immigration Centre yesterday, where the homemade devices had caused a fire, leaving 2 people with minor injuries. The suspect himself was found dead a short while later at a nearby petrol station. In other news, all birds must soon be kept indoors across England amid fears of the spread of avian flu. From Monday the 7th of November, it will be a legal requirement to house flocks and follow stringent biosecurity measures. The decision extends mandatory housing orders already in force in Suffolk, Norfolk and parts of Essex. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs says this year the UK has faced its largest ever outbreak of bird flu, with the disease detected at more than 70 premises this month alone. International news, and the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says Vladimir Putin is exacting revenge for his military failures upon the civilians of Ukraine by cutting off their power and water supply. Russia targeted crucial energy supplies in several cities overnight. In the capital, Kyiv, a number of missiles damaged a hydroelectric power plant, leaving 350,000 homes in darkness. Those are your latest news stories. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, what a weekend it's been on Kent's beaches. Yes, 1,000 people crossed the English Channel on Saturday. 468 crossed the English Channel yesterday. They, of course, are being housed at the reception centre at Manston, the former RAF base and airport. It's designed for about 1,000 people. Obviously, with 4,000 people, there are many problems, including an outbreak, we now know, of diphtheria and an increasing use of violence against border force officers. That's led to a huge public outcry and to an outrage that took place in Dover docks yesterday when what we understand to believe, or believed to be, a 66-year-old man from High Wycombe started throwing petrol bombs at the migrant centre and then committed suicide. Quite how a breach of security that serious took place, I simply don't know. I'm sure there will be an inquiry into it. We also this weekend have had more beach landings. That means young men getting off onto Kent Shingle, disappearing into the countryside behind, helicopter searches, people being rounded up. The whole thing is a disaster. Our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has in the past said tougher things about this crisis than any minister, certainly cabinet minister, before. And it seems that the London-based media, Remainer, globalist media, have got it in for her in just the most extraordinary way. They want her to be hounded out of office. Now, the House of Commons this afternoon at 5 o'clock met to discuss this. When I say crisis, I think really what we should be saying actually is emergency. It was interesting to hear both Labour and Conservative members of Parliament, arguing we should be booking more hotels for those that cross the English Channel in dinghies. Already, we're approaching 300 hotels that have filled up all over this country. So desperate are they to find more accommodation. We even had the case of a castle in Cornwall that they wanted to use for migrants. But Suella Braverman, in response, gave what I certainly think it was a spirited response. Have a look, have a listen to her words just an hour ago.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not. Some 40,000 people have arrived on the south coast this year alone, many of them facilitated by criminal gangs, some of them actual members of criminal gangs. So let's stop pretending that they are all refugees in distress. The whole country knows that that is not true.
Well, that's language I've been using for the last couple of years, and I've been told off repeatedly, don't call it an invasion. But hey, it's over 40,000 people this year. It's over 80,000 people since this whole problem began back in 2018. So she is on robust form. But you tell me, should Braverman stay or should she go? Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, last week, we were in Uxbridge last Thursday in Boris Johnson's constituency, and this week, Farage at large goes to Stoke-on-Trent. Politically fascinating, all 3 seats in the Stoke area are currently held by the Conservatives. These are all key marginals. And one of the issues I want to debate with the audience and local businesses is how does a place that's always been known for manufacturing manage in the age of net zero? If you want to come along, take part in our open discussion, come and join Farage at large, Stoke-on-Trent, this Thursday, the 3rd of November. Just go to gbnews.uk to book your place. You better hurry. It'll all be gone by lunchtime tomorrow. I absolutely promise you. Now, back to this situation. Should Braverman stay? Should she go? It was quite extraordinary to hear Roger Gale, the North Thanet MP, say that he thought the Home Secretary had deliberately engineered an overcrowding of the Manston facility in order to put off people crossing the Channel. I found that a pretty extraordinary attack from her own side. But to assess whether she should stay or go, to assess what we make of her performance in the House of Commons just now, I'm joined by Stephen Valdez-Simmons, Refugee and Migrant Rights Director at Amnesty International. Stephen, good evening. Welcome back to the programme. One of the points that the Home Secretary made that I find myself in strong agreement with is surely we can end this pretence that everybody crossing the English Channel is, an innocent that is fleeing persecution of some kind, given that every single day on TikTok we see people advertising the fact they're coming to the UK. They're pictured in London making that symbol from the very dangerous Albanian gang and with bags of money. There are, would you not agree, too many people coming into this country, not just trafficked by criminals, but with criminal intent.
I think that's a gross exaggeration. And if we look at the decision making that has happened at the Home Office over several years now, we see time and time again that when decisions are actually made, and there's a big problem about processing claims, when they're actually made, the great majority of people are found to be entitled to asylum. And so rather than pretending that all the noise is making some false pretense about the genuineness of people's claims, the reality is so much of the noise is doing down people's character in atrocious circumstances when the reality is the Home Secretary must know, because it's her own data that proves it, the people who make claims, on the whole, have good claims to make.
Well, Stephen, one of the reasons why so many of these claims get passed in the end is, of course, because we wouldn't be able to deport people anyway, seeing as we're stuck inside the ECHR. That's certainly my view of it. But look, how do you assess the situation, the position of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary? Do you believe she should stay, carry on with the job, or do you want her to go?
Well, I want her policies to go, and frankly, I'd like her rhetoric to go too, because it's not helping. She says she wants to be straight with the British people. She should be. She should explain that the reason the asylum system has collapsed is because the policies of her predecessor, Priti Patel, which she has continued to pursue, have determined to put on hold thousands and thousands of claims. So we now have enormous backlogs that the system cannot cope with. If she is prepared to sort that out and actually decide claims, then fine. Get on and do that fairly and properly. If not, then no, of course we don't want to see her continuing, because the situation for everybody will just get much worse.
And Stephen, finally, do you see any upper limit to the numbers crossing the channel in, say, 2023? Do you have a sort of figure in your head, or is it limitless?
I have no figure in my head. I've always been quite frank about that. Countries around the world are obliged to share responsibility for people seeking asylum. The truth of the matter is that this country, because of its geography, sees, compared to many other places in the world, relatively few people. If it put its head to managing, or if government put its head to managing the system, then we could do perfectly well. Of course, we'd have to decide the claims that people make. Some of them would be found to be not good. Very many of them would be found to be good. But unless and until we get on with process claims, nothing can be done.
We've given asylum in the last 18 months or so to people from Afghanistan, people from Hong Kong, people from Ukraine. We more than do our bit, don't we, when it comes to genuine refugees, and we always have done.
Well, let's be a bit more honest about some of that. The people from Hong Kong are British nationals who have a visa. It's a perfectly good thing, which allows them to come on the basis of their British nationality and their capacity to financially support themselves. Nothing to do with them being at any risk of persecution at all. And many people in Hong Kong who may very well be at risk of persecution, but they're not British nationals or cannot financially support themselves, have no visa at all. We have done, relatively speaking, reasonably well by Ukrainians, although it took a very long time to even get that up and running. We've done a bit less well in respect of Afghans, where we've got a resettlement programme that promises much, but continues to deliver very little. And the great majority of people who ever see asylum in this country, who are compelled to come via our asylum system, they are left to the dangerous journeys we see on our television because nothing is made available for them.
Well, Stephen, as ever, thank you for appearing on the programme and giving a very different point of view to myself, but thank you for doing it. I'm joined by Norman Baker, former Home Office Minister. This whole issue of immigration, and obviously we're talking specifically today, very heated exchanges about, what's been happening in Manston and the attack on Dover yesterday, but actually the whole immigration system. When do you think that our population has risen by between 8 and 10 million in the last 25 years. Are we getting this right, Norman Baker?
Well, if you look at the number of migrants in each European country, we're actually down towards the bottom end, which isn't the perception that perhaps the Home Secretary gave. The figures I saw today when I checked it online, where there are 135,000 migrants, of which 83,000 hadn't been processed yet properly. Now, this is a matter which you and I will agree on, that when people come in here and claim asylum, it's beholden to the state to analyse those claims quickly, to integrate those people who are genuine asylum seekers who've got a threat of being tortured or death when they go back to their country, and to require those who aren't genuine asylum seekers, if you like, to be removed from the country. And they haven't been dealt with quickly enough. And one of the problems that the build-up we're seeing is that there is a failure of successive administrations, or successive Home Secretaries anyway, to make sure people are assessed quickly.
Well, you were there and part of it. I mean, it wasn't working very well then either, was it?
It wasn't working particularly well. No. I wasn't the immigration minister, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I made my comments about immigration very clear at that point, but I made that issue very clear to the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May.
I mean, with Europe, the reason the numbers are massive in Europe, of course, is the insane EU asylum policy, saying that anyone that set foot on EU soil across the Mediterranean could stay. And one of the reasons, I mean, one of the big parts of the Brexit campaign was we should not be subject, ultimately, to that kind of system. And I just wonder, isn't this a breach of trust with a country that voted to take back control of its borders?
Well, I think it's if I may say so, Nigel, not accurate to present it in that way, because if you look at Turkey, which is not part of the European Union, they've got 3.5 million
but they've been paid
migrants.
Substantial sums of money to do that.
Well, they may well have been, but there are other countries. If you look at the countries where the most migrants can be found, they're often some of the poorest countries in the world. So it's a feature of geography as much as anything else, why we've got this situation.
So are you happy with current net migration figures and the number crossing the
I don't want to
channel?
look at it in terms of the number of people. What I'm keen to do is if people arrive on our shores and they are genuinely in fear of their life or being tortured.
If it's genuine,
yes.
If it's genuine, I fully understand that.
Right. We should show those people compassion and try to make sure they integrate properly. And if they are economic migrants from Albania, and you and I have talked about Albania before, then they should be sent back. Now, I don't know why we haven't reached a deal with the Albanian government, because quite clearly I'm not aware that there's any particular issue of human rights abuses in Albania. No. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there isn't, then those people should be dealt with in a different way. Now, what I don't like about the Home Secretary and her statement, talking about invasions and so on, she's lumping together those who are genuine refugees with those who are economic migrants, and that's wrong to do that in that particular way.
I put it to you, if you lived in a Kent village called Aycliffe and boats were landing on your beach and young men were coming into your village, you might feel differently. Norman, I'm going to keep you here because we're going to go to Aycliffe now, and I want to get your response to this because we're joined now from Aycliffe by Kerry Jones. Kerry is somebody living in that village of Aycliffe, and we spoke last week to some people. And Kerry, as I understand it, someone did try to break into your house. Somebody who landed on a beach near you did try to break into your house. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It was back in August. And I actually
Kerry,
him my back gate.
Yeah, I mean, you must have been pretty scared by this experience.
Absolutely,
and there was over the week
terrified.
Terrified, yeah.
Absolutely
and there was a press report over the weekend. Suggesting that you now keep. There was a press report over the weekend suggesting that you now keep a weapon under your bed.
Yes, I do. Since August, when I had that incident where I caught him half over my back gate, and I shouted at him, he shouted at me, and neither of us could understand a word of each other. I dialed 999 while he was still on my property, was told that police vehicles were en route to me, and nobody came. So ever since, I have slept with a sledgehammer.
A sledgehammer? Goodness gracious me! Do you happen to have the sledgehammer with you?
I do. It's right next to me.
Gosh. Well, that is a very, very graphic image, I have to say, and I absolutely hope and pray that you never need to use it. Kerry, living in that village, do you have a message to our politicians about what needs to happen?
Yes, I do. They need to come and see the residents of Aycliffe. We need a huge meeting. This estate was absolutely beautiful, and now it's just literally running alive. People are scared. We have got so many elderly and vulnerable people that live on this estate. People are really scared. Everybody is on high alert. Even if you go upstairs in your house, you have to make sure everything is locked downstairs.
Yeah. Kerry, I want to say a huge thank you to coming on GB News and sharing that very disturbing experience with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Norma Baker, I mean, the village of Aycliffe, there's Kerry Jones, and we had some other residents on last week. The beach, Shakespeare Beach, is not very far away. And here you've got young men, 21, 22 years old, going into people's houses, trying to force entry through people's front doors. And Kerry says the politicians need to come here to Aycliffe just to see what it's doing to our community. Do you have some sympathy with her?
Well, as you'll know, Nigel, I didn't hear what she was saying.
But that's why I passed it on.
OK. I mean, look, of course a politician should go down there, in the same way that Robert Jenrick went down today to Manson to have a look round at what was happening down there. It's important that they do that. I have to say that, from what I gather, there's a very unfortunate experience here which has affected this woman, and that's indefensible. And those people who are responsible for that, person or persons, should be deported.
They're over there. They're over there. That building over there behind me, they're the people responsible for what's happening in Aycliffe. We're still signed up to a European Convention on Human Rights that makes deporting almost anybody impossible.
Well, I don't think that's true, actually, and I'm certainly in favour of deporting people who conduct criminal activity such as that. Of course he must be deported. I think it's fair to say, however, that incidents of violence and abusive behaviour can be found in our native population as well as in those who arrive.
That is not the point, is it? That is not the point.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to present it to suggest that this is common behaviour from everybody who's arriving on our shores. I don't think it is. I think it's minority behaviour. And those which we dealt with firmly and properly.
We'll agree on one thing. Let's hope it stays that way, and a very, very small minority. Norman Baker, as ever, thank you for coming on the programme. In a moment, vaccine mandates. 40,000 people in the care sector lost their jobs because they didn't have the vaccine. But still, universities and medical colleges are insisting those doing degrees in medicine and care have to have a double vaccine. Why? We'll find out in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask, We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Well, I hope you think we've had a fair and spirited debate about the whole cross-channel issue and indeed Suella Braverman and her future. Let's get some of your audience reactions. Simon says stay. She is being hounded by the left over a matter that has been investigated and concluded. This is about her leaking, as it were, confidential documents, which means what she was doing is she was sending documents on to senior MPs who were friends of hers to say, look, what do you think? And please, don't tell me that all cabinet ministers don't do this, because they do. Remember, only a few days ago, they were telling us that the Home Secretary had passed top secret material. We know this now to be a fabrication. Another viewer says it's vital Suella remains as Home Secretary. The left are desperate to get her out of the Home Office for a reason. She will finally reform the Home Office and the law to deal with the illegal immigration crisis. Well, I think crisis is almost becoming an emergency now. Sean says, I don't think she will stay, but I am indifferent to her. OK. Steve says she absolutely should stay, but unfortunately, I think the wets will force her out. And Robert says, go. Half the Tory party want her out. She's history. Well, I think she took the view today, Suella Braverman, having maintained a lot of silence over the last few days. I think she took the view in the House of Commons that if she was going to go, she'd go out in a blaze of glory and say what she really thought. And goodness gracious me, she did. Now, one group of people that we've been talking about before on this platform are the 40,000 people, much needed people, working in the care sector who lost their jobs because they didn't want to get vaccinated. And you may remember this clip from a month or two back from Louise Akerster, who just lost her job at a Hull care home. See these images.
That's it. Goodbye to everybody, all the people that I've cared for so long. This is so unfair. I can't believe what the bloody government is doing to us. I just don't get it. They don't understand. They think that what they're doing is to better everybody, and it's not. It's just not. Oh, God. I can't do it. This is awful.
Well, she's not quite as upset as she was in that particular clip, but there's still a strong sense of resentment because Louise Akerster is here with me in the studio. So you decided not to have the vaccine. Was there any specific reason for that?
There was several. My main one was I didn't trust it yet. You know, it had come about very quickly. It was still in trials, and something just didn't sit right, and I wasn't prepared to put my body at risk for the sake of something that had no long-term data for, something that, you know, was just developed so rapidly and distributed so rapidly without knowing any long-term side effects.
But you lost your job.
I did lose my job. I lost more than my job. I lost everything in the long run, and I still don't regret it to this day, because I know now I've got my health, and the more that people are getting in touch with me and the more I've looked into it, I believe I've made the right decision.
OK, you believe you made the right decision? There are 40,000 of you in that. And yet, in the NHS, you could have carried on with your job. There is an unfairness there, isn't there?
Absolutely. I think the carers were used as guinea pigs. I believe that the government perhaps, you know, tested the waters with us, and then once they realised how many, you know, staff members they stood to lose, that's perhaps when they decided to do the U-turn, so that there wasn't going to, you know, struggle as much in the NHS.
No, I mean, that's happened with the NHS, completely different approach to the care sector. And yet, you know, we hear that the UK's main university application body is still imposing vaccine mandates on students applying for nursing and social care courses.
Yes, and I know some myself who have been desperate to finish their courses and can't because they don't want to have these vaccines. And when we are already struggling for, you know, nurses, doctors, carers, you know, How are they getting away with it? It's disgusting.
Louise, it seems extraordinary. Alan Miller, you're co-founder of the anti-mandate group Together, and I have been supporting your campaign on this programme, as you know.
Thank you.
Is there nothing that can be done, firstly, for people like Louise, and there are 40,000 of them, do you get any sense from government there might be a rethink on this?
Well, I think we've seen some encouraging things happen internationally, actually. We've seen a situation where a New York federal judge has overturned the municipal workers' mandate. We've seen Alberta talking about how wrong it was. We've seen also that in the UK, some MPs have started talking about it. One recently said that they were ashamed that they voted for it and it should not have happened. So I think that we are seeing a recognition of how problematic it is. There's a pragmatic conversation, then there's a moral and ethical principle. The principle is about bodily choice and autonomy, and these care workers...
So, just to be clear on that, is this an anti-vaccine campaign?
No, this is a pro-choice and pro-autonomy campaign. At Together, we have many people who've made lots of choices. That's utterly their own choice, and we don't, we have vaccinated and unvaccinated. The campaign against passports and against mandates specifically was about choice and bodily autonomy. Now, as it happens, we have a campaign, as you've talked about, to reinstate, compensate and apologise. Steve Barclay could make a very practical solution that this government could do with some wins. We have over 160,000 vacancies in the sector. People like Louise could be brought back, encouraged, actually celebrated for the long service that was done. We should remind ourselves at the height of the start of things when no one actually knew what was going on. Then when we saw what happened with Omicron, the idea now that UCAS and the universities are imposing this, not only is it discriminatory, anti-privacy, but actually it has no foundation in science at all either. So you've got a situation where people that could be, the next generation of talent are now not going into that situation, and you've got, this is utterly unacceptable.
So this is a Department of Education issue.
Indeed.
So this is now, your campaign now has to broaden, doesn't it?
It does. Well, so we've got also, a couple of ways of doing this. We have over 300,000 signatories. We encourage them to write to the actual institutions, to the Department of Education and to their MPs, and actually to the universities, to the heads of the universities, and to make their voices heard. But I think also, what we should do is encourage everyone to have this discussion, because we have every winter we're told we have this crisis in the NHS, but actually this year is a combination of 2 years of lockdown, COVID-only NHS, all the excess deaths we've seen. We do see that there are serious situations here, and we could readily resolve some of it if that people were brave enough to say, you know what, this was a mistake and it was wrong. Yeah. And let's see some credibility in politics, right? Let's see some people fess up to that and resolve it.
I have to say, I had the first 2 vaccines and I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't have the booster because I was told if I get COVID, it doesn't stop me passing it on. And I think that really was the argument here, for people like you. Mm-hmm. So, as I say, I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'm absolutely pro-choice. I hate government, and now our university is moving to this level. Final thought, would you like your old job back?
I don't think they deserve me.
It's a qualified yes from Louise, I think. Thank you both for coming on, and I really mean it. I'm very, very pleased and proud to back your campaign. Thank you. I think it's absolutely right. Now, before the break, a final thought, the What the Farage moment. Today, it was announced that Elon Musk has become, wait for it, the sole director of Twitter. He's sacked everybody else. He's got rid of the lot. He's going to sack 25% of the vastly overpaid woke workforce out on the west coast of America. So is he a hero? Well, in terms of the fact that he does believe in free speech, albeit with sensible limits. And, free speech does come, of course, with responsibilities. But I'll tell you this, folks, he has paid far too much money for that company, way too much money for that company. Shares in the tech sector in the USA have been falling for some time. I told you, didn't I, that when Nick Clegg joined Facebook, I told you, don't have Facebook shares. Well, they're down 25% this year. Even Amazon took a bath last week. So Musk is going to lose an absolute fortune on this. Can he do some good with it? Can he turn it into something that is commercial? Because the remarkable thing is, he's paid nearly 40 billion quid for a company that's never actually made any profits. Anyway, I wish Musk well, but the world's richest man may not be, the next time we see a list, quite as rich as he was before. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by a former deputy editor of The Spectator, and she's a commentator on all things good and bad in Britain today. Joining me on Talking Pints is Petronella Wyatt.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This Thursday, Farage at large comes to Stoke-on-Trent. All three parliamentary constituencies used to be Labour. Currently, they're all Conservative. Local MP Jonathan Gullis will join us. One of the big questions I'm going to be asking is how can Stoke, a manufacturing place, how can it survive in a world of net zero? That and much else this Thursday, Farage at large in Stoke. If you want to come, gbnews.uk. It's my favourite time of the day. It absolutely is. Yes, it's Talking Pints, and I'm joined by Petronella Wyatt. Petronella, welcome
Nigel.
to the programme. Cheers. First today. How about that? You know, you've been deputy editor of The Spectator, and You write prolifically on the royals and the state of the country, and you've had a distinguished career in journalism. But for those that don't know you very well, you, of course, grew up with politics and current affairs as part of your life from about this age, I guess.
I did. I mean, I was very, very lucky because I had a much older father. Well, on his fourth marriage, not so lucky for him because it cost him a lot of money, but he had been a politician for decades. He was the youngest MP in the House of Commons just after the war.
Was that the 45 election?
Yes,
wasn't
it was the 45 election. So I grew up with these sort of titans of politics from both sides of the House, because my father had been a Labour MP, then he became a Thatcherite. But we were friends with, he was friends with everybody. For example, he'd go to the chamber, speak from the Labour benches, you kind of bellow at various Tory MPs, and then all go out to dinner, because two of my godparents were Tory MPs. Macmillan's son, Maurice Macmillan,
yes.
Harold Macmillan's son, and Julian Amory, my godparents. Yeah. And also I was very, very fond of my father's friend, Dennis Healy, who is enormous fun, great photographer.
And what a character.
Oh, such a character, and so cultured. I mean, the thing I miss, and I'm actually sorry for the young because they're missing this too, are those sort of great people who were so cultured, so honourable, resigned if something happened on their watch, even if it wasn't their fault, like Carrington and the Falklands. It wasn't his fault that the Argentines invaded.
But the honourable thing to do.
Exactly. And
Healy, you mentioned Dennis Healy. And, of course, you say what a cultured man he was. Because also, he was the beachmaster at Anzio, wasn't he, for the landings? I mean, incredibly brave things these people did as well.
They were incredibly brave. A lot of them, including my father, had fought in the war.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that people today don't really understand what that generation went through. And I know it's a very controversial thing to say, but I sort of regret in a sense that there's no national service, because we all need a sense of cultural identity. And I think a lot of young people today are just drifting without pride in their country. I mean, the educational system's a disaster in that respect. And I'm a very mixed bag. I'm a kind of mongrel because I have Hungarian blood, I have Turkish blood, Austrian blood, everything you could name. I could never go to Crufts because... and I voted Remain, but I'm very patriotic.
Yeah.
And I love this country. And what annoys me is the way it's unnecessarily and wrongly denigrated.
So, you say very clearly, I love this country. You regret the way kids are being taught in this country, and so do I. But where does this self-loathing come from? I mean, take, for example, slavery, the issue of slavery. You would think, from the public debate we have around that subject, that we were the only country in the history of humanity who'd ever engaged in the slave trade. There's no debate about the fact that, in fact, the Royal Navy spent decades trying to stamp it out. No debate about the fact that slavery happens all over the world today. Where does this particular self-loathing come from?
It's very interesting. I was reading a very interesting essay by H.L. Mencken, and it was called The Anglo-Saxon. And he identified various traits, and this included the English. And one of them was it was a combination between a thuggishness, but also an unease with themselves and a sort of self-destructive sense, and a lack of general sort of pride. And by that, I don't mean jingoism or nationalism. I mean sort of patriotism. And you travel to other countries in Europe, and they're very proud of their culture in a way that we're not. Children in France, in Austria, they're still being taught the classics. In fact, they learn more Shakespeare than British children do.
Yeah.
Which is a great shame. But I think that there's a lot of hatred in this country at the moment.
When you say, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, when you say that, you know, Dennis Healey was a friend of the family and Julian Amory was a friend of the family, now, politically, there are two figures who were miles and miles apart, and yet there was a culture, wasn't there, where you could disagree with somebody quite fiercely, but absolutely respect the right of the other person to have that view.
That is, you cannot be civilised without that. And it's also to do with manners. I think people in this country have the worst manners in Western Europe. And I travel a lot in Western Europe. And I'm quite shocked by the way that I still actually get up when an older person enters the room, or I give up my seat for somebody on the tube. Nobody else seems to do it. And also this intolerance is also a way of being disrespectful towards people. Even if you don't agree with somebody's view, you listen politely. This is the way I was brought up. And then you make your own points, but you don't shout them down. You don't yell. You don't try and get them sacked. You don't. It's...
So we have cultural decline, we have educational decline, we have behavioural decline. And is that part of what's led to such poor politicians?
Yes, I think it is. But David Cameron is very much at fault because Cameron had his A-list, and to get on the A-list, it was all optical. You didn't need experience in politics, and the younger you were, the better. And if you're a woman, it was
Liz
even
Truss,
better.
of course, was an A-lister.
Exactly. Look, without letters.
Does that prove the point?
It certainly does. But I wouldn't. You can't blame politics alone, because this is across the board, unfortunately.
It's societal.
I mean, it's our culture, and social media has a lot to do with that. Our culture has rejected experience, age, manners, tolerance for youth, a cheap kind of celebrity. I mean, I sort of groan when I see these YouTube influencers.
Well, a lot of that comes from America, of course.
A lot of it does.
A lot of cultural influences do come from America. But our politicians did, and I'm not going to push this point too hard, but did Boris Johnson get what he deserved in the end?
Boris, it's very difficult. Boris is sort of split personality. There's a lot of good in Boris, and there's a lot in Boris that is self-destructive. And I think Boris could have been a very good Prime Minister if he'd had the right people around him and listened, because he has to be sort of saved from himself, from his weaknesses. For example, his kind of cursory relationship with the truth and that kind of thing. I think his instincts are generally good. I mean, to demonise him, there's something called Boris derangement syndrome. I don't know if you read about it, but people either...
It's not quite the same as Trump derangement syndrome.
No, but he produces similar reaction in people. They either hate him to a point of manners, or they worship him to a point of manners, because I always think that some of his diehard supporters are like members of a sort of weird cult. Whereas there should be something in between. You know, he's got a lot to contribute, but he has weaknesses and faults. And I'm afraid he's squandered, and it's difficult to feel. He's squandered this 80-seat majority.
I know.
And look at where he's left us.
And it's so awful. Let's try and finish on a positive note. The royal family. The death of the 96-year-old Queen. Which I was shocked at my own reaction to it, how strong an emotional reaction I had to it. And I think much of the country felt that way. And during those 10 days of mourning, just behind us here, they were queuing all down the embankment, and I went out and talked to people, and I thought, wow, this restores my faith in decency and values. It's not all bad, is it, in the country?
Of course it's not bad. I will never give up on this country. I will never leave this country, because I believe that we are essentially decent, but essentially decent, are getting shouted down by people in the media and social media who are making a bigger noise.
So we have to be braver, don't we?
We do have to be braver. I try to be brave. I mean, I get so much sort of hate mail, death threats and stuff on Twitter.
Is it worse for women than men, do you think?
That's an interesting one. The insults are probably worse because they're so personal.
Yeah.
But having a politician as a father kind of helped, because I remember when he was on an IRA death list, so we had police guards around the house. And I read so many untrue things about him in the papers that I was fortunate to realise that these people, they don't matter.
But you know what? The best thing to do is have a drink and forget about it.
Oh, exactly.
Thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. We have a couple of minutes left. It's Farage the Farage. I've no idea what is before me. Robert asks, do you think the Prime Minister should attend the climate summit? Well, I tell you what, if he does, having said he wouldn't, that'd be the first U-turn from Rishi and it wouldn't make sense. Petronella, he said he wouldn't go because there was too much to deal with here. What do you think?
I don't think you should go, but I think Charles should go. I think Charles should have been allowed to go. It's basically
a political king.
It's not really a political issue, Nigel. Everyone seems to, and I'm a sceptic. I know there's climate change, but I'm a sceptic as to what causes it, because it was actually hotter. We had more experience of climate in the Middle Ages and during the Tudor period.
We did. And then we had a sort of little ice age. And
of course, and the Romans were growing wine all the way up to Birmingham.
I know. I know. It was very interesting. I mean, not long ago, I had a chap in the studio here, you know, big man for net zero. And I asked him, what percentage of CO2 emissions every year in the world are man-made? He didn't know. It's 3%.
But also, it makes no difference what we do, because China, Russia, India won't participate. So we're, to use a vulgar kind of phrase, we're sort of pissing into the wind.
Yeah, just about allowed before the watershed. We've got time for one more very quickly. Angela says, Suella Braverman said 40,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel this year. Do you believe the figure to be far greater? If you add in people coming in on the backs of lorries and undetected boats coming in to East Anglian ports, you know, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the figure is, of course, a lot higher. We've got to deal with this crisis, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, the whole system's broken down and it's now an emergency.
I agree.
It's a complete emergency and it's causing horrendous problems. I mean, when people are firebombing and others are breaking into people's houses, and it's not just a question of I get the argument about us being a civilized nation taking in political refugees, but a lot of these people
they're coming from Albania.
Males who are joining criminal gangs.
You can't stop Petronella White. You just can't stop her once she gets going. But we're out of time. We're done. I've got to hand over to Mark Stein.
What a great show. Fantastic to see Petronella. That was the golden age of the Specky. She was a terrific editor at that magazine when I was there. Fantastic to see Petronella. We're going to try and keep it going for the next hour. We have a terrific lineup for you. We have Kelvin McKenzie, another great editor. We have David Starkey. We have our favourite Hilversum milkmaid. That's Ava Velardingerbroek. And we have Dr. Ros Jones on a rather disturbing story. We're going to get to it all. We're going to get to migrants. We're going to get to vaccines. We're going to get to whether banks are going to let you have your money. All the big stuff coming up right after the weather.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. The weather stays very changeable during the next 24 hours and beyond. Further spells of rain and showers, windy with that as well. And overnight, we're likely to see some channels across English Channel coasts. An area of low pressure deepening through the evening, slides along the channel. That's going to bring some very strong winds to northern France. They've named this as a storm. And for the English Channel coast During the evening and overnight, the winds also strengthen, gales developing, and by the end of the night, the risk of 60 or even 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts for the most exposed southern coasts. Spells of rain also across much of the country. The rain on and off overnight, and it will be heavy at times. But of course, with the wind and the rain, it's not going to be a cold night. 10 or 11 Celsius in many places. But it is a wet and windy start to the day, especially for eastern parts of the UK. Quite quickly, the main area of rain pushes into the Northern Isles, where it sticks around through much of the day, followed very quickly on by showers. And these showers will be frequent, they'll be heavy, especially across the southern half of the UK, accompanied by this gusty wind, rumbles of thunder as well, but some brighter interludes. Northern England, southern Scotland, eastern Scotland, likely to see some drier and sunnier weather for a time. Quite quickly, the showers across Western Scotland, Northern Ireland push through here, and showers continuing into Tuesday night, early hours of Wednesday. Although, by the end of the night, I think there will be some clear skies across central and eastern parts of the country, along with lighter winds, and as a result, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures in places. So certainly a fresher start on Wednesday compared with recent mild mornings. A bright start as well in central and eastern UK, but further west, it's going to soon turn wet and windy. Spells of rain moving through Northern Ireland into Scotland, eventually reaching northern and western England as well as Wales, accompanied by a strong wind with the risk of gales around Irish Sea coasts. And then Thursday brings more wet and unsettled weather.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation.